The Pyramid of Khafre is the second great pyramid of Giza. Although this monument may seem larger than that of his father, it is smaller, and was constructed about 32 feet higher on the plateau. Fortunately, it was looted by grave robbers. The foundation laid only 623 feet from the Great Pyramid. It measured 705 feet along the side at the base and stood 446 feet high. The slope of the sides was 53 degrees and 51 degrees. Although a good amount of material was used to construct this pyramid, they were careless into laying down these stones in their courses. The layers were often not horizontal, and some of the stones did not have mortar between them. The angles at the corner were not lined up correctly, which require a small correction at the very top. The smooth side, which were cased along the lower layers with pink granite for faraway Aswan, and further up with white limestone from the Tura quarries. As for the interior, it's much simpler. Khafre adopted a style of less is more. It consists of one plain burial chamber, which is oriented east to west and roofed with gray limestone slabs, a small side chamber for storage, and two straightforward access passages. The Great Sphinx of Giza is one among the most famous statues of ancient Egypt in the world. In description, here we have a recumbent lion with the head of an Egyptian king, which was carved out of limestone on the Giza Plateau, probably in the reign of King Khafre, during the period of the Old Kingdom of Egypt. It is said that the erosion of the body was caused by the rainfall of a type last seen in the Nile Valley in 6000 BC, when it was a swamp on the edge of savanna lands. The Sphinx, the largest of all, was carved to a scale of 20:1 for the head and about 20:1 for the lion's body. No other Old Kingdom pyramid temple floor plans indicate so many statues at such a scale. The Sphinx was carved directly from the natural limestone of the Giza Plateau, which is part of the Mokattam Formation, formed from marine sediments deposited with water in Gulf Northeast Africa during the Eocene period. From New Kingdom Egypt, Temple of Ramses II, Abu Simbel, is an ancient temple complex originally cut into a solid rock cliff in southern Egypt and located at the second cataract of the Nile River. Although we don't know the exact reason as to why he chose this location for the construction, but it might be a symbolic message to the Nubians about the stability and longevity Ramses expected of his territorial expansion. The temple complex is made up of two main constructions that were carved into a mountain on site. It consists of two temples: the Great Temple, which is dedicated to the gods Ra, Hurakti, Ptah, and the deity Ramses II, and the small temple dedicated to the goddess Hathor and Queen Nefertari, Ramses' favorite wife. The Great Temple stands 98 feet high and 150 feet long, with four seated colossi flanking the entrance, two on each side, depicting Ramses II on his throne, each one 65 feet tall. Beneath these giant figures are smaller statues depicting Ramses' conquered enemies, the Nubians, Libyans, and Hittites. The temple aligns with the east so that twice a year on February 21st and October 21st the sun shines directly into the sanctuary of the temple to illuminate the statues of Ramses and alignment of sacred structures with the rising or setting sun, or with the position of the sun at the solstices, which was common throughout the ancient world. But the sanctuary of the Great Temple differs from these other sites in that the statue of the god Ptah, the fourth statue, which stands among the others, is carefully positioned so that it never illuminates at any time. The reason for this action is because he was the representative of the underworld. Passing between the Colossi through the central entrance, the interior of the temple is decorated with engravings showing Ramses and Nefertari paying homage to the gods. Across the wall of the hypostyle hall depicts Ramses' great victory at Kadesh. The small temple stands at a height of 40 feet and 92 feet long. It is also adorned by colossi across the front facade, 3 on either side of the doorway, depicting Ramses and his queen Nefertari, 4 statues of the king and 2 of the queen at a height of 32 feet. This is unique. Usually, a female is represented on a much smaller scale than the pharaoh, while at Abu Simbel, Nefertari is rendered the same size as Ramses. Another unique point of this temple is that it is the second time in ancient Egyptian history that a ruler dedicated a temple to his wife. As for the interiors, both temples feature stunning columns and a wealth of inscriptions. Also, in both temples, Ramses is recognized as a god among other gods, and his choice of an already sacred locale would have strengthened this impression among the people. Unfortunately, the temple complex was abandoned sometime after the death of Ramses the Great. The sand slowly started to encroach on the temple until over years the entire complex was buried in the endless expanses of desert sand. Until Giovanni Bolsoni rediscovered the entrance to the Great Temple in 1817. The temple is no longer located in its original position. The temple complex was carefully taken apart and relocated with great care back in the 1960s. Although both structures come from different periods of time, they are unique in their way. The innovations from the Old Kingdom to the New Kingdom is that on the New Kingdom they were pretty detailed than it was back then. There are more statues on the Temple of Ramses II, Abu Simbel, from the exterior to the interior, than the Pyramid of Khafre and the Great Sphinx, Gizeh.